Pokemon loves their biblical apocalypse scenarios ever since they revealed Arceus, moments in which our villains have plunged the world into a sea of chaos beyond the scope of humanity. This wasn't just an event caused within Hisui under the hand of Volo as he paired with the abandoned child of Arceus, that is Giratina. No, in fact there have been many scenarios in which we find that Pokemon draws close inspiration from religion. From the 40 days of Lugia storms representing the 40 days and 40 nights of the Great Flood Noah built his ark for, the universe without spirit that Cyrus was determined to create, the Garden of Eden that Archie and Maxie wanted to create as they reset the world with Project Azoth, the Buddhist that is Calyrex, the end times beast that is Eternamax, and of course Ghetsis himself, who aimed to restore the original dragon of Unova so he could bear dominion over the ultimate truth, over God itself. Howdy there, I'm Acrylic, and this is one idea I've been sitting on for over a year now, because Pokemon really has been hiding biblical scenarios and references in front of our face since the very beginning. Now, I won't be talking about every design that draws religious inspiration, like how Hoopa Unbound draws incredibly clear references from the Ashura or Bodhisattvas, or how Lugia's Dex entry changed in Generation 4 to say that it can cause a 40-day storm, which is a clear reference to Noah's Ark and has stayed mostly consistent since that edition. I'll actually save the majority of them for another day, because today we're going to dig deep into the end of the world. I'll save those for a different day for the most part, because today we're primarily digging into the end of the world and how it happens within Pokemon in regards to their inspirations. Though before we can even do that, we need to start at the beginning of the universe. The beginning of Pokemon's universe gets incredibly strange in one particular portion of it, but otherwise the plates of Arceus within Legends Arceus, as they are expanded, gives us just enough to make a proper story of it. Though it is up to us to put the story together in order, so I've interpreted it as the following, starting with the birth of Arceus. For the insect plate states, where all creation was born, that is the being's place of origin. Mind plate states the original one breathed alone before the universe came. The pixie plate states the original one is in all things. The original one is nowhere at all. From the legend plate, we get from all creations, over all creations, does the original one watch over all. And then the earth plate states, when the universe was created, its shards became this plate. So to break down what we already have so far, the being that it speaks of is the one true Arceus. We know ever since Legends Arceus that the Arceus that we know is just a piece of the greater being. And the only time we've assumedly seen this greater being is at the absolute beginning of that story, when we float before a form of pure light, pure energy within a vast and empty space. If you want to think of it logically, then a being of pure energy would make some resemblance of sense. The universe had to be born from something, and if this being existed before the universe, then it had to impart life upon the world, upon the universe, and give that energy. This is where that line stating the original one is in all things but nowhere at all, what that insinuates. It is a being of energy that exists within all life, for it is life itself, a creature that has given itself to all, but is not tangible. You can't hold it, much like a spirit would be described as. From all creations, over all creations, does the original one watch over all, is a very interesting sentence, because now that we've established that Arceus is stated to be within all in the world of Pokemon, it could be watching through us, you and I, though there was another theory that I highly subscribe to. Now, I made a whole video on this, so I'll just give you the takeaway from that video, and if you want the extra nitty-gritty details and analysis, you can go watch The Thousand Eyes of Arceus, because we often state that Arceus has 1,000 arms. We don't really know what these look like, and even I have mistakenly claimed that the Arceus we see within Hisui calls itself one of the 1,000 arms, and it doesn't. It just simply states that it is a piece of the greater being. So with this idea that it is watching over everything, while it could be watching through our eyes, it is more likely watching through the eyes of the unknown. Creatures that are strange in origin tied very closely to Arceus, and has power that is often considered legendary when they're all grouped together. They can literally change reality as we know it. They can make wishes come true. They have their own dimension, and within Hisui, they place themselves all over the place. But these placements are not random or haphazard. They are purposeful locations in which they sit and watch all who pass by. The unknown are placed in vital locations in Hisui, near main story event locations, near the noble Pokemon's homes, important structures, and more. They don't even hide themselves from us as the player, as one attaches to us, and ever since then, we are put on a side mission to find them all, each one giving hints as to how to find the next unknown. They want to be found, they want to be brought together, and it is through their sight, their singular staring eye, that Arceus is able to see the world without coming down to us itself. Because, you know, it'd be kind of a pretty big deal if God just kind of arrived, briefcase in hand, and said, "Hello, everybody, I'm back from getting milk and cigarettes from the gas station. Thank you. Oh my God." People honestly would think it'd be the end of the world immediately, you know? So instead, these thousand eyes, the unknown, watch and report to Arceus. They, as the code of the universe, let it know how its creation is developing, how well are humans and Pokemon getting along, and so much more. But we'll get to some of that later when we talk about the old verses. The last of this set, as I've organized them simply, states that when the universe was created, its shards became this plate. Specifically, the Earth Plate states this, which divides heaven and earth, immortality and mortality, gods, or rather kami, and humans. The strangest of all plates is simply the Flame Plate, stating that the power of defeated giants infuses this plate. This has been interpreted as a number of different ideas. Some believe that it could have been Regigigas, maybe lost godlike forms of the Regis that we are aware of, and any additional unknown Regis. Theories have circulated that it is other legendary Pokemon, such as Eternamax, or species similar to it in their full power, but we have no real confirmation. But if we only had shards at first that then had to be combined to create a plate, and how these plates have immense power within them, is very likely that they truly were born from some form of unknown entity to us. Potentially other gods or beings that have ascended to godhood, though now they are gone, defeated, and their powers transferred into physical objects. Our next line is from the Stone Plate. It gathers power from the plates, listening for the flute's song. Simply put, it is through these plates that the piece of Arceus that we are aware of is capable of creating miracles through the power of these plates. It can change its typing, it can combine plates to create things such as the Jewel of Life, and grants a flourish of greenery to a desolate land of sand, and so much more. It is an almighty power, though if these plates are taken away and Arceus is attacked, it can fall. And were another creature to harness the power of all these plates, then it has the capacity to at least overthrow one of these pieces of Arceus. Rumor states that it may even be able to defeat the one true being. And of course, simply waiting for the flute's call is using the Celestica flute in actually its full form, with all the plates combining together to actually grant you the flute that allows the Stairway to Heaven to appear before you and allows you to meet Arceus, or rather a piece of it in its realm. Now, a great video that I will draw reference from time and time again is Why Do You Always Kill Gods in RPGs by Moon Channel, a fantastic video that has also shed some additional light on culture and has allowed me to better understand the inspirations of the Hisui region, but we'll get to that later. Instead, there is where I learned through this reliable source, or his reliable sources, that godhood is a title to earn, a right to ascend, if you would, something that is strongly believed in when you talk about things like Hinduism, which influenced Buddhism, explaining why individuals within Buddhism practice aim for becoming a Buddha in their own right. And then when you speak on Shinto in specific, then you delve into the belief in sacred spirits or deities that are a bit different from typical gods. These beings are innately a part of life, individuals that represent concepts themselves. These sacred spirits spawn from belief or necessity within the universe. For example, a sacred spirit or deity that would represent time, space, and antimatter of all that is matter. A shadow and a parallel to the universe to balance our own, and of course, that is where Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina would then come in. Icicle Plate states, two beings of time and space set free from the original one. Stating that they were set free from the original one is the most interesting part of this. It does not state that they were set free from Arceus, they were born of the one true being. the original one, though at least when we meet Arceus within the Sinjo ruins, we can see it grant us an egg of one of the trio of myth. What this could then mean is that, much like the Arceus that we know, the trio of myth that we know are but smaller avatars of the true forms, which ties back to this idea of them being sacred spirits that represent concepts, which turns them into a conquerable being, a defeatable creature, a god that can be slain, creatures that can be overthrown by humanity or other Pokemon, thus explaining the giants that were defeated to create the plates. Now, while it does not state when Giratina was born, we have to assume that in the instance in which these two were set free, Dialga and Palkia, Giratina was created in turn, a third being that would serve as antimatter, an antithesis not to creation, but to physical matter itself, the equal and opposite reaction to the creation of the universe, of time and space, the shadow and reflection of the great Mount Coronet, that which we are told at the very beginning of Diamond and Pearl. Our next plates state the following, with the Zap plate stating the third being raged, raining down bolts of anger. Toxic plate, the rules of time and space change within the opposite world. The Spooky plate, the other side of this world was given by the original one to its raging third. And the Iron plate, that which fills the other side of the world, can shape the rage and mold it. Giratina raged in its creation, in its birth, releasing bolts of energy, bolts of lightning, attacks of its own within this void. We would see these bolts within Legends Arceus as the same bolts that would fill the noble Pokemon with energy and cause them to rampage, much like Giratina. We are introduced to the opposite world, that reflection of the Great Mountain and of our universe, as I had stated. This opposite world is the Distortion Realm, a place that is admittedly incredibly strange in its purpose depending on the version that you do look at. This opposite world is without gravity, it is without logic, it is without true structure, but it is necessary to the reality that we exist in. Within the anime, if it were to be destroyed, then our reality would be destroyed. And within the manga, it serves as a place in which Archie and Maxie's spirits resided, were revived, and were then given purpose to return to the mortal realm in their new form and help protect Hoenn from incoming disaster. Within the games and the mini-series of Pokemon evolutions that reflects it, Cyrus is brought to this world and openly states that perhaps this is the world he had wished for all along, that this must be the world without spirit. Now, it's hard to fully grasp the concept of the Distortion Realm on its surface, but it does serve many purposes. And ultimately, it serves as the opposite to our own realm, the second side to our coin. Remove it and reality will crumble. Though this torn world is referred to as not only a world on the reverse side of ours, but also a world where the heavens and the earth are as one. In other words, this could be partially inspired by Takamagahara, the floating bridge of heaven, which you could say is strongly reflected through the bridge of stairs we also used to reach Arceus, the two being reflections or distorted versions of each other, and so it was given by the original one to the raging third, Giratina. And that which fills the other side of the world can shape the rage and mold it, meaning that the environment itself will grant Giratina purpose. It will become a home to Giratina. It will learn to love its home and serve as its protector, something that it actively does even when Dialga and Palkia battle against each other, attacking them in order to prevent additional destruction on the Distortion Realm and our own world, to prevent destruction of the universe. Though if it were to step out of line, then we learn of the following. Fist Plate. The rift is born of disorder on the other side of this world. The rifts we are made aware of are the space-time rifts in Hisui, but we can assume this isn't the only time something like this has happened if Giratina were the one to cause disorder rather than working towards peace within its realm. To follow, we have 3 more plates. The Draco Plate. 3 beings were born to bind time and space. The Blank Plate. 3 beings whose power can hold both time and space fixed. The Dread Plate. 2 make matter, and 3 make spirit, shaping the world. These 3 are Uxie, Mesprit, and Azelf, 3 beings who can come together to control Dialga and Palkia, but hold no reign over Giratina. And it is through Dialga and Palkia that matter is created, and with these Lake Guardians, humanity is granted spirit, which then shapes the world. The Lake Guardians are another great example of these sacred spirits, as they are directly translated not as Lake Guardians, but rather Lake Gods, beings that are not on either side of the reflection, but are the lake themselves. It is through these three that intelligence, willpower, and emotion are granted to mankind in specific. This was not granted to Pokemon through their power, though it is not made clear why. You could theorize that all Pokemon may be considered beings of energy, closer in relation to Arceus and the original one, and as such they are created with these as part of who they are, these fine qualities that make up the spirit, but humanity was not, and needed these concepts gifted to us. In addition, Uxie, Mesprit, and Azelf have the first letters of their names spelling out Uma, U-M-A, meaning unidentified, mysterious animals. Uma, without it being an acronym, can translate to either noon or horse from Japanese, which is a very interesting coincidence due to the origin forms that we receive of Palkia and Dialga, forms that are theorized to be their true forms, the ones they take in their home dimension, and their way of mimicking Arceus' form as an attempt to draw out its power. All three of them effectively being horses in their own right. All except Giratina, who does take the form of a serpent, those long tendrils that extend from its form, giving us a vague visual for where 6 heavenly wings could have been, something that would draw our minds to the falling of an angel, Lucifer, and the form of trickery that it takes being the snake. But why the horse? Well, they serve as the sacred mounts of the kami, those spirits that we have been mentioning here and there, meaning that through following Shinto belief, Arceus is the sacred mount of the original one, and both Dialga and Palkia serve in their own right as sacred mounts to a higher being as well. And by following this Shinto belief and this Shinto inspiration, we also find that the snake does not hold the same negative connotation that we would find in Christianity or other religions. Instead, we find that the snake is meant to represent rebirth, renewal. It is a messenger of the kami, and they are protectors of the land, meaning they are effectively protectors of the mortal world. This idea of rebirth and renewal, protector of the earthly realm, will all be incredibly important later when we talk about Giratina and how it later turns a new leaf, no longer looking to overthrow Arceus, but rather protect the earthly realm, the mortal realm itself. Next trio of plates state the following: the Sky Plate, the being poured the remains of its power into stone and buried it deep. The Meadow Plate, the powers of plates are shared among Pokemon. And the Splash Plate, the rightful bearer of a plate draws from the plate it holds. The remains of these powers are not the plates. This is in fact the origin ore, the same ore that is found within Mount Coronet and can be mined to create the Origin Ball and the Red Chain, items that contain the power of the kami and are able to put a literal rein on the horses that are Dialga and Palkia. Though once again, this power would hold no effect over Giratina, for it is meant to serve as a protector, a safeguard if all else fails. The following plate explains how their powers are shared among Pokemon, that they hold the same energy and can be enlivened by the power stored within the plates. And that last plate simply explains that Pokemon of the correct typing are able to draw power from the same typing of plate. So since that was the Splash Plate, then any water Pokemon would be the rightful bearer of the plate and can draw power from it. This then ties back to the concept of ascending, of gaining power and status and being able to hold the same powers as that which stands above you. You are the rightful bearer as you are of the same ilk. You are of the same energy. You are the descendant of a kami, a giant, and you can attain a higher level of being, something that Arceus likely did and overthrew what came before. This would also then explain what we see in Giratina and Volo's mission to overthrow Arceus, as it is assumed that Giratina could be the rightful bearer of all the plates, considering it is a reflection of the original one. But before we continue, I just want to say, thank you for watching. If you're new and enjoying this, subscribe for weekly content just like this. I also stream on this channel weekly, so come say hi. As we go along, let me know your thoughts. I love the short hellos just as much as the long comments that bring another perspective to what I've presented. Plus comments, sharing the video, and watch time are the best free ways to support the channel. If you'd like to go the extra mile while continuing to support free content for all, become a member for as little as $3 a month, while also getting perks for yourself, such as early access to videos and your name shouted out in the end credits of every single video. But all of that aside, once again, thank you for watching, and on with the video. Now we can dig into the biblical apocalypse of Hisui, an event that all occurs due to the teamwork of Giratina and Volo, though once again, I have to make it clear that Volo's rise to strike at Arceus is something that lines up incredibly well with the belief of ascending to become a kami. Hisui reflects the history of the real world very intimately, with religious groups being suppressed and the government attempting to absorb them into itself as a form of control, something that is reflected through the Diamond and Pearl clans worshipping different gods and having different beliefs, but are otherwise clans that still follow the word of Commander Kamado, someone who would represent some of the last samurai that would exist through the end of the Edo period and into the Meiji Restoration. Once more, I again highly recommend that video by Moon Channel, as it delves far deeper into the real life inspirations and history than I will actually take time to do here. Now, Volo himself is fairly complicated, an individual who knows a lot and is often theorized to be a time traveler, someone who is theorized to have gone through dimensions and is questioned on how he gained so much information, especially as during his heel turn at the end of the game, he bears semblance to Arceus while also bearing clothing that would be in line with the Greek and Roman architecture, something that Volo mimics in his own design. Now, for this next part, I originally wasn't going to talk about his clothing, but it fits far too well with why he acts the way he does, how it fits with the belief of earning your ascension into becoming a kami, and why Volo's Pokemon stuck by his side. An individual known as Siciloquy effectively explained how Volo's outfit is actually intentionally bad because he is effectively a fanboy of a culture that he does not fully understand and was looking to mimic in his admiration. And whether or not he is actually of Celestica descent is now irrelevant, as he has not been raised with Celestica values. From his clothing used to mimic the people and clothing he has never seen, which doesn't even follow Greek or Roman ideas, as pants were even seen as feminine, to the hair that mimics a god he believes but has never seen, and even his specific hand gestures, which are admittedly far too specific to be a coincidence. These hand gestures effectively come together to say that he is God, that he is the speaker, and that he is the hand of justice, all of which line up with what his claims were. Volo makes it very clear that he sees himself and Giratina as the abandoned and forgotten children of Arceus, that it is his birthright to not only meet Arceus, but to also ascend to defeat Arceus. He complains that for some reason, Arceus has clearly chosen us as the player over himself. For we all are supposed to be children of the kami, we are all supposed to ascend, and yet for some reason he is abandoned time and time again. And in his pursuit of overthrowing Arceus, he also claims that his goal is to replace God and recreate the world itself, to make it something new and create a much better universe, a better form of existence than what the original one has created. Originally, I saw this as ridiculous, but with the new perspective that we've explored today, I've realized just how significant and possible this actually is within lore. How Volo very well could have ascended and became a new kami, possibly overthrowing the original one and restarting everything. Whether or not existence itself would actually be better than it is would be something that we would never know without actually experiencing it. Alongside Volo is Giratina, a Pokemon that has not quite learned its purpose yet. It has not been molded by the void that is the Distortion Realm, and through its rage and destruction, it became a creature that was feared by the people of Hisui. It was so incredibly feared that after the hero of Hisui defeated it with the noble Pokemon at his side, Giratina's statues were destroyed, meaning that it was once worshipped until this point in time. I will also make a side note that through the portraits of the past leaders of Hisui, the hero of Hisui may actually be all three of them. This would be through the understanding that the hero had 10 Pokemon, though 6 Pokemon was always believed and established as the maximum you can have. And with the 3 holding similar style portraits in frame and design, alongside 10 Pokeballs split between them, then we may find that the hero may have been 3 heroes of Hisui banded together as one in unity. Which is very interesting when we take that kami given right to rise into the celestial world, as we have ancestors of Archie and Maxie, 2 individuals that we will talk about in excess later regarding their mission within Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire. Back to Giratina, a kami that has not found its purpose and has not yet been shaped by the distortion world. It seeks vengeance upon its creator, the original one. It feels betrayed, abandoned, lost in a world that it was forced into and banished into the loneliness of the void, a place in which it loses understanding of what the sun is. Now, understandably, any living creature would lose sight of what is right and wrong, and said creature would seek to change its situation by any means necessary, feeling that this is the right path. And so Giratina moved in tandem with Volo's own purpose to rise up against the original one. This turmoil and disorder is what causes the rifts to open up throughout Hisui. Through these rifts, we find that the people of Hisui are divided even further from nature that they should be living alongside, and how the noble Pokemon that have already been divided by humanity and their quarrels became feared, as they are struck by the energy-filled lightning of hatred that spawns from these rifts. And I spoke on this in my video on Pokopia, but it is the will of Arceus that humanity and Pokemon live in harmony together, that they will grow together and build bonds that enliven the world as a whole, that their lives would be indistinguishable from one another. Our understanding of this spawns from two of the old verses, the first being verse 3. No claws nor fangs, no strength to claim, no man could hope to hold his own to mighty Pokemon. But bolts of light rained down one day, 10 times they fell, 10 times struck true upon 10 Pokemon. Then to weak man did these 10 turn, this strength to be, and all were blessed by loyal Pokemon. Were not these bolts a gift to man? Were they not your almighty grace, great Sinnoh Paragon? This is simply speaking of how humanity stands no chance to Pokemon, that in a true fight, we are destined to lose every single time. I mean, have you seen a Dragonite use Hyper Beam? And even in the modern day, with the power of more powerful Pokeballs, we still fail. The crowning achievement of Pokemon capture devices being the Master Ball, and even that fails. Once in the anime with a Whiscash eating it, then there's knowing if Mewtwo wanted to, it could just stop and psychically crush a Pokeball, and Terapagos destroying the Master Ball that tried to contain it. The most powerful tools we have can still effectively fail. I don't quite know how intense the war that waged across the moor of Icarus within Unova was, though I imagine it was a modern war that occurred. And even then, the Swords of Justice stepped in and fought against all of humanity to save the Pokemon harmed by the war between humans. They lose. Humanity loses in that fight, and so we effectively will never stand a chance. And knowing this, Arceus granted Pokemon to not only the hero, but to us as well. Because we can follow this with verse 19. When first this land was formed, man and Mon lived happily, sharing all that they could see by kind acts born and warmed. One Pokemon then proposed that they should always ready be, to help humans should they need, and let their presence be disclosed. And that is why to this day, not all Pokemon do flee. When a human they do see, they leap out where tall grasses sway. This was the way it was meant to be, when humanity and Pokemon lived together. The light of the original one shone upon us all, and we all assisted one another in our lives. We enriched each other's lives and made them better for it. And so it was proposed that if humans ever needed help, the Pokemon would come to us, thus explaining wild encounters. Now, Pokemon as a franchise does build itself on the connections of humanity and nature a lot. It has done so since the very beginning, but in less common or subtle ways. If you look at the manga, it is far less subtle about this, drawing the importance of it high above many other things, especially when you continue further into the red and yellow arcs. Pokemon have suddenly appeared for people when a need is established. A child needing a friend, a trainer beginning their journey, a soon-to-be hero, saving humanity from the desolation that threatens a region. And so fate decides it. We meet a Pokemon, though we may not even know the reasons for our connections until many months or even many years later, much like the connections we make in the real world. And with this, it is understood that this is the will of Arceus. But things did not stay this way as we read the final verse. Once it shone upon us all with all the warmth of welcome sun, but now we weep, to grief we fall, starved of light now it is gone. And some they go, despair withal, in search of it they reel and run, they quit their hurts, abandon hall, and leave our lands to be undone. And when they're gone beyond recall, this land will be a home to none. This land will only ever be a home to Pokemon. Humanity eventually left nature, abandoned it, destroyed the lands and lost their connection with nature itself, and as everything is left behind, abandoned, then it slowly crumpled into nothingness. An old dilapidated home that was once deeply loved and cherished is left to rot in itself. Though it does more than this, for when we enter abandoned power plants, burned mansions, and lost hotels, we find that even within these horrid conditions, Pokemon have made a new home. that even when we leave our homes, they will become homes once more to the Pokemon, even if we never return. It is this divide between humanity and Pokemon that threatened Hisui, that went against the will of Arceus. When we divide ourselves from the Kami, from the sacred spirit, we divide ourselves from purpose, from its power, and serve to only increase the risk of calamity befalling us. And when it does, because we fear nature, because we fear Pokemon, there would be nobody available to stand up against Giratina and Volo in their quest to overthrow the Kami, the original one. We then find that it is through our intervention as the player that this changes within Hisui. Our purpose by Arceus is to fill the Pokédex, though in doing so, we become tied up in the politics and story of Hisui's people. We stand alongside the Diamond and Pearl clans, we unite them together, calm the raging noble Pokemon that they had divided amongst their clans, and help the people of Hisui love and understand Pokemon. We effectively bring the light of Arceus back to the lands, helping it shine upon all as we help restore what was once lost. And if we hadn't, then the world would have effectively ended. It would have been born into something new and unknown, and there's no telling if it would be truly good or bad. It would just be something new. After the climax of Legends Arceus, we find that both Volo and Giratina eventually turn new leaves. Starting with Volo, he states that he doesn't care how long it takes. He will meet Arceus one day. But his first act is to tell Professor Laventon that Giratina is not a bad Pokemon, that it has good in its heart, and that it has changed. To not fear this Pokemon, to forgive it for the events that have occurred. Volo then disappears, only to return to Lumio City hundreds of years later and donate his clothing to the museum. Clothing that only he could have made. Clothing that only he wore, with the same hair that he had, and a pendant that is not even replicated when we wear his clothes within Hisui. He donates his clothing and stares at Laventon's sketches with nostalgia, remembering the days of old. But more than this, he leaves behind his Celestica flute. I've talked about all of this in my One-Eyed Immortals video, but there's something special to this. Because when you attain the status of a Kami, when you reach this higher level, you effectively achieve a form of immortality. Thank you again, Moon Channel, for this, as it helps tie together what I had suspected for Volo very nicely. Volo did become immortal, though this can still only be temporary as the Kami are not effectively all-powerful. They are not the same gods that we see in Western culture. They are a pantheon of sacred spirits that make up existence itself. And with humanity being able to achieve Kami, or godhood if you really want to translate it that way, we have to question how Volo managed this. Maybe he truly did reach Arceus, but I believe it is something that happened right before our very eyes. We witnessed him becoming a Kami, for he did something that no other human being has ever done since the events of Hisui. Volo had aligned itself with Giratina perfectly, parallels of each other, of human and Kami already existing, united in front against a greater deity that they wanted to strike down. But more importantly, in his alignment with Giratina, he served an even greater purpose. He changed the minds of the public in their view of Giratina. He was able to at least convince Laventon that Giratina was good, that it changed, and I guarantee from there, Laventon, even in fear of the looming shadow, would have accepted this. That he would have looked at Giratina and said that it was a Pokemon like any other, that it needed to be understood, and it was a friend like any other, bridging that gap between humanity and Giratina. This would then explain the dynamic shift that we see in Giratina from Hisui to the modern events of Sinnoh, that as the public opinion of Giratina changed, even if it was something that stayed obscure or was lost to time, this still changed. And the opportunity to love and grow with Giratina within the world meant that Volo did something that was otherwise not seen as possible. And so Volo in that moment became a Kami, reaching immortality, and lived on for over 100 years to grant his clothing and Celestica flute to the museum, what may be his final act before disappearing for good. He no longer needs the flute, for he is, as he claimed, a Kami. He is now part of that pantheon. But what of Giratina and its new leaf? Well, over a century later, we would find history relatively repeating itself as Cyrus aims to create a world without spirit. And over the past 2 years, I have contemplated and discussed many times with others about whether or not he means the literal spirit, and it is still a strange thing, admittedly. So I will be interpreting it as both the literal and metaphorical, that he intends to get rid of the human spirit, as he states, but that he also intends to rid the emotions of humanity from them. For it is through emotion that we find ourselves making mistakes. War and strife exist through hate, jealousy, and a disrespect for human life. And if the spirit is removed, then this may end. Cyrus rises up and is someone who was on the cusp of succeeding. In one version, he is stopped by the main character, though it is in another timeline, the Platinum timeline, that we see Giratina arise when the universe needed it most. For when Dialga and Palkia are successfully controlled through the use of the Red Chain, the powers of Archie, Maxie, and Azoth contained and under the thumb of Cyrus, it seems that all is lost. Time, space, willpower, emotion, intelligence, all that makes up the world is completely under a singular human's thumb. This is juxtaposed to Volo, who held power but still walked alongside his Pokemon with respect. Two moments where humanity stood upon the great mountain, though in Cyrus's case, he was rejected from the title of Kami. Giratina rises from the ground, a symbol of extreme fear, a shadow unlike any other that stands tall above our mortal frame. It shrugs off Dialga and Palkia, it destroys the chains that bind them, and it crashes down upon Cyrus without restraint. And in doing so, Cyrus disappears into nothingness. On the other side of our coin, the distortion world, Cyrus awakes and stares at the void, the world that acts differently in its creation, acts differently in both time and space, something that was born when the universe was born and came into existence before Archie, Maxie, and Azoth did. And this is why he openly states that this must be similar to the world without spirit that he wished for. He then decides that it doesn't matter what we decide, no matter what we do to fight him, he intends to stay in the distortion world, which is incredibly strange in one sense, as he will be isolated from everything. But on the other hand, it truly is the closest to what he intended to create. When we meet Cyrus as a member of Team Rainbow Rocket, he never saw the Distortion Realm, even though he claims that his plans succeeded. Instead, all he remembers is being engulfed in shadow, which would of course be Giratina. Through his interaction with us, he realizes that he is not in the new world that he intended to create. He looks at us, openly stating that he has not reached his desired world and must remedy this. Despite this claim though, he tries to tell your Rotom Dex that he has no intention of harming it. His goal is specifically the human spirit, which was granted by Archie, Maxie, and Azoth. And if they didn't grant it, if they didn't exist before the Distortion Realm, then of course this place would be a place without spirit, theoretically. Now, this is incredibly interesting because it is the human spirit that is flawed. It is something where, especially if you are a religious individual, your purpose is to strengthen your spirit, cleanse it, to seek your faith and transform it to something new that the light of God would smile upon. And even if you aren't religious, you should just work to being a better person every single day. And this is going to take a wild turn, but I promise that all of this is going to tie right back in. Not just to Cyrus, but also to the original dragon of Unova, Project Azoth within Oris, and AZ himself. Without videos and information presented to me by Professor Paquette and his partner Mouse Science, I would have not been able to dig nearly as deep and connect all of these pieces so thoroughly. So when I state this next part is incredibly important, I mean it, because Pokemon has been building on this throughout many generations. This comes from Esoterica and their video on spiritual alchemy. The connection on how alchemy and religion is one and the same, that the transformation of metal into a noble metal, from lead to gold, is the same as the transformation of our soul into the pure spirit. Though just as lead to gold is only possible through the avenue of the Philosopher's Stone, the transformation of man into a pure spirit can only be done through Christ. Then we add in that Azoth itself is the primary process or agent of transformation in nature, a kind of universal medicine, or simply the Philosopher's Stone itself. Azoth is the true stuff of transformation, and fire is the means of transformation. Being Azoth and fire go hand in hand. What is the substance being transformed, or rather the catalyst of it, and how that transformation is actually done? In the case of Cyrus, Dialga and Palkia would effectively be the stone, but their powers are the fire. For what we will talk about later, we have Primal Kyogre and Groudon being Azoth, but the fire itself is their power, primal energy, with that project literally being called Project Azoth under Archie and Maxie. And then something very much tells me that Ghetsis saw himself as both Azoth and fire, but we will get to that later. Ultimately, both Cyrus and Volo looked to change existence itself, and were Cyrus to achieve his goals, he would have effectively become a kami in his own right. But it seems as though Giratina rejected him, making Giratina's own personal journey complete, going from assisting in the creation of the apocalypse to being the one that prevents it. And as a reminder, while many people may depict Giratina as Satan or Lucifer, and while it definitely has inspirations from the fallen angel that Lucifer is, Giratina is not evil. It is the other side of our reality, just as necessary as death is to life and dark is to light. It is simply a necessary protector of the earth, as it now serves, that had to be molded into something new, into a true kami with its purpose in mind as it deserved to be. Let's take another step back to a time before humanity and life as a whole was established upon the planet, to a time when the great opposing powers of earth and sea clashed against one another as they expanded, to the time in which the super ancient trio didn't just rule the planet, but created it. Now, what I am about to say is a bit more speculative, admittedly, based upon how the trio functions as a whole, but we will also be digging into what is often accepted as their biblical counterparts, and then the kami from them. Starting with the formation of the planet, there are a number of things that are necessary for a planet to fully form, scientifically speaking, and it is through the power of our super ancient trio that 3 of these different scenarios or criteria are actually met, especially done so through the battling and abilities that they have. We begin with Kyogre, the great personification of the sea. It needs no water to swim in, for it can simply fly. It creates more than just torrential downpours, but spawns the waters for the seas and the oceans itself. It is with the power of this Pokemon that our planet has become the great blue orb that we often see it as. Normally, I would draw comparisons from Kyogre to the stories of the Leviathan, a creature that admittedly looks incredibly different, that would battle with the behemoth until all was destroyed. Something we see very similarly with Kyogre's battle with Groudon, though I actually want to step away from this idea and lead you back into the Shinto belief, considering we've established strong connections so far with it and legendary or mythical Pokemon likely being kami or being representations of kami. Even in just general folklore, whales are seen as a sign of change or even omens of earthquakes and tsunamis. In Shinto beliefs, whales are regarded as symbols of wisdom, protection, and guidance. They are seen as messengers of the sea, carrying the knowledge and spirit of the ocean's depths. You might consider Watatsumi to be the Shinto kami that maybe Kyogre is inspired by, though this is likely incorrect. Watatsumi is the sea spirit, and there is a sea spirit den within Kalos, though within the den is where we would find Articuno, Zapdos, and Moltres. This would then insinuate that Watatsumi, or Wadatsumi, is the inspiration for Lugia, thanks to its connection to said legendary birds. So then, if not the sea spirit, then who is Kyogre inspired by? Well, it is simply as we have stated. They are very similar to horses, in that whales themselves may also be seen as kami, or spirits of the ocean's depths. Now, you additionally may ask, why would these entities be worshipped? Aren't Kyogre and Groudon seen as destructive forces that are bound to rip the world apart in their battling? Well, yes, but actually no. In fact, it is stated that they are both seen as saviors. Kyogre for quenching the lands that were plagued with drought. Groudon, regarded as a savior for evaporating flooded areas of the world. They both serve to balance and enrich the planet as we know it. With this in mind, let's continue. For with Kyogre creating the waters of life that cover our planet, we also need a superheated core to give warmth to our planet from the inside. Something that would create reactions from within, would create volcanoes and transform the metals and rocks of our planet into new geological materials and formations. Something that would create a living cycle for that which doesn't live in the traditional sense, while also providing to the beings that we do consider alive. And so Groudon began serving its purpose with its birth. Groudon is the personification of the land itself. For every step it takes in all magma that it releases, it comes into contact with water to then create new land. It evaporates water, expands land masses, and continues in an onward march to create a new home for new creatures in its primal form. Oddly similar to this is Heatran, a Pokemon often considered deeply tied to Groudon in ways we don't quite know yet. For while Groudon is the land, Heatran is the volcano, tying it to the kami known as Kagutsuchi, which, let's take a small detour to talk about him. Kagutsuchi is the Shinto god of fire and volcanoes, known for his fiery nature and destructive power. He is the son of Izanami and Izanagi, the creator gods of Japan. During his birth, Kagutsuchi's intense heat caused his mother Izanami to die, leading to his father's wrath, which resulted in his beheading and the creation of 8 volcanoes from his body parts. He is also associated with the sun goddess Amaterasu and is considered a significant deity in Japanese mythology, embodying both creation and destruction. And I had refrained from saying this until now, but Izanami and Izanagi are the mythical creators of Japan itself, doing so with a spear as their tool, stirring the primordial ocean. They are the inspiration for Spear Pillar, tying them as the parallels of both Dog and Palkia, which Dog and Palkia, Diamond and Pearl clans, which have ancestors that relate down to Archie and Maxie. This is a long, threaded, just red string, I'm telling you. Now, back to Heatran though, it makes you wonder, knowing that there are multiple canonical Heatran within the world and they do bear genders, what would happen if you were to bring them all together and combine them once more, but that's a speculative theory at best. So if Heatran is likely Kagutsuchi, then who would Groudon be inspired by? Well, it may be Okuninushi. In Shinto mythology, Okuninushi is referred as the god of the land and is central to the myths recorded in the Kojiki and Nihon Shoki. He is depicted as the head of the Kinutsukami, the gods of the earth, and is associated with the central land of Reed Plains. Okuninushi is known for his role in the creation of the land and his later surrender to the heavenly deities, where he became the ruler of the unseen world in exchange for the land. He is also linked to agriculture, farming, and relationships, reflected in his multifaceted divinity. After all, it makes sense. It would be incredibly difficult to farm in a world without land, and were said lands flooded, then it wouldn't even be viable to try and grow the major staple of rice, which does grow in swamp-like conditions, but not multiple feet underwater. In other words, yes, Groudon could effectively be seen as a savior in its own right. Eventually, these two titans, Kyogre and Groudon, clash with each other, creating massive amounts of destruction. Their energy would flow and burst, released into the world around them. And according to Legend ZA, we learn that they were not only in their primal forms, but were also in possession of their respective orbs, meaning they truly were at the peak of their power. They would create land and sea, but more importantly, they would create steam while shifting the weather in ways we could never truly imagine. A true end-of-the-world biblical cataclysm. But this is what helped beget the world itself, for the arrival of Rayquaza helped change everything. Rayquaza not only has the power to eliminate the powers of Kyogre and Groudon in their primal forms, but also has the ability to shift and control the weather itself. It is the personification of the sky, but more aptly, it would be the personification or creator of the atmosphere that surrounds the planet. Originally, one might draw comparisons to the Ziz, despite not looking similar and having very different stories. They still generally do protect humanity, serve it in some capacity, and are great beings of the sky. But I believe it would be more accurate to compare Rayquaza to Ameno Minakanushi, the first deity to appear in the heavenly realm, often associated with the origins of the universe. The following information I was able to source from the Kokugakuin Digital Museum. According to some of the myths relating the unfolding of heaven and earth, Ameno Minakanushi was the first kami to come into being in the plane of heaven as a solitary kami, otherwise known as Hitorigami, and to hide its presence. Also counted as one of the Zoka Sanshin, 3 kami of creation, and one of the 5 Kotoamatsu Kami, separate heavenly deities. Ameno Minakanushi is found at the very beginning of Kojiki, while only appearing in an alternate version within the 4th alternate writing quoted in Nihongi. What's strange about this is that in old leaks, there was an original connection between the trio of myth and Rayquaza, with our green serpent actually existing before Giratina. It would fly in its creation so close to the sun that it cast a shadow unlike any other, thus creating the greatest shadow to ever live, with nothing else to overpower it, no shadow being created bigger ever again, as we have Giratina. Though again, that is old, non-canonical leak information. This may not reflect the modern lore, but it still serves as another point of insight that can help us solidify Rayquaza's purpose and inspiration. The strange thing is that it is stated that originally Ameno Minakanushi was not well celebrated, and its acts were not really spoken of, though eventually it would replace the Kami of the North Star at many shrines. Considering Rayquaza's association with space, stars, and by that effect, wishes upon stars, we can piece together the inspiration and how it was changed to better fit within the world of Pokemon. Rayquaza's entry into our story means that it would stop disaster time and time again regarding Kyogre and Groudon's clashes. It did so at the beginning of time, though this didn't mean that all was immediately well. There was excessive heat, high humidity in the air, and so much more thanks to this clash that occurred. Within ZA, it is stated that the clash that did occur before the Draconids' wish for Rayquaza to save them had lasted for 20 days. In addition, they had their orbs during this specific event. We don't know how long the original clash went on for at the beginning of the world. All we can assume is that it helped shape the world. And with the aftermath, Rayquaza took the steam, humidity, the disastrous weather, all of it, and turned it into the atmosphere that protects the planet, thus granting us our final piece of the puzzle that is necessary for life to exist. And theoretically speaking then, as life then began to flourish for the first time, we would have been given the first garden. The beginning of life itself in religious texts, the Garden of Eden. And this is another incredibly important piece of information as we dig into the events that specifically occur within Hoenn. This is editing Acrylic here that just realized I never talked about a really specific instance that could relate to the Garden of Eden, which is the Tree of Life. A Tree of Life that existed within the movies only, had the Regis in it, and was directly connected to Mew and ancient life. If Mew dies, the tree dies. If the tree dies, Mew dies. And thus we get a very interesting other connection to the Garden of Eden and or Adam and Eve, just as an extra miniature note to throw in here. Archie and Maxie held three purposes for their teams. In the original games, Archie simply wanted to cover the world in water, while Maxie wanted to expand the land. Very simple ideas that match with the most basic idea of Groudon and Kyogre. Then within Oris, we find that Archie wanted to expand the seas with the purpose of trying to return the world to a state for Pokemon by awakening Kyogre to wipe out human civilization and return the world to its beginnings, so that Pokemon can live untainted by humanity's progress. Alternatively to this, or parallel, Maxie and Team Magma intended to create a world for human progress by awakening Groudon to expand the land masses, giving humanity more space on which to build and develop civilization. Both of these are very strong opposing ideas, but then there's another purpose that is hidden deep beneath even this. Project Azoth. The beginning and the alpha and the omega, and a tie back to alchemy as we have discussed. This is no fan theory, this is no mistranslation. Project Azoth is exactly as it was named even in Japanese. And so I read to you the files that are found within Oris as part of Team Magma or Aqua's plans, depending on which game you're playing. Project Azoth file number 1. The goal of Project Azoth is to return the world, return everything to the beginning. In order to further the project, we must proceed with research on Groudon and Kyogre's primal reversion. Primal reversion is a potential of Pokemon evolution, a potential different from Mega Evolution. Mega Evolution is made possible by the energy of people in Pokemon. Primal reversion is made possible by natural energy. In Primal reversion, Groudon and Kyogre absorbs natural energy into their bodies, thereby increasing their power dramatically. Both states significantly enhance Pokemon's power. The difference lies in the source of the required energy. Within ZA, they continue to make the distinction between primal and mega energy clear and different. They intend to harness what is effectively the original power that makes up the planet itself within Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire and return the world to the beginning, effectively returning it to the Garden of Eden. To follow, we have file number 2. We intend to analyze the power of the ultimate weapon used in Kalos 3,000 years ago and work on the development of a drill weapon utilizing the technology. The seafloor cavern is sealed by the power of a legendary Pokemon. The only way to gain access to the cavern is to break the seal with power that exceeds that of the Pokemon. According to the report from the Petalburg Recon team, Devon Corporation holds the secret of the technology of the ultimate weapon. We will dedicate all our resources to obtain this technology. Technology that AZ created as he himself gained power over life and death, and created something that gave life, that could move life as he wished, that created destruction and was eventually buried, but now it has returned in the hands of another. This was essentially their plan of action though, this second file. Nothing that necessarily builds upon how this functions, but is at least the way in which they would achieve their goals. Unfortunately, Archie and Maxie weren't keenly aware of just how horrifying and dangerous this plan actually was. they didn't originally know that this would effectively kill all life on the planet, making Project Azoth a complete reset of all life. This all then goes back to the idea of Azoth and fire. We need a material component in which to transform. In this case, all life on the planet itself is that material component. Primal Kyogre and Groudon is Azoth, and the transformative fire would then be the power of primal energy. Archie and Maxie would realize the error of their ways and try to stop the events that would soon unfold. They then team up with us as the player to stop the powers that are Kyogre and Groudon to prevent the literal annihilation of all life on the planet. Unfortunately, even after this, their respective admins, Courtney and Matt, would still attempt to fulfill the plan to complete Project Azoth. This would be done by using keystones to resonate with the massive amount of infinite energy held within a rocket, causing it to explode and revert the world to the very beginning as the project had originally intended. To explain, infinite energy is not direct Pokemon energy. It is in fact energy that has been taken from Pokemon and transformed into its purest form, a form that can be used in a number of devices, making them incredibly powerful in their own right. One might even be able to say that infinite energy, if it is truly the most basic form of energy, could be another form of primal energy, and keystones being able to resonate with the life energy of Pokemon to help them mega evolve would then be able to resonate with this infinite energy, theoretically allowing this plan to actually be possible. This plan is eventually thwarted as part of the Delta episode, with Delta effectively representing change, just as Alpha and Omega represent the beginning and the end. The use of the word Delta is very, very interesting, especially as not only is Rayquaza given the title of the Delta Pokemon, but also because of what is stated that AZ said when he witnessed Rayquaza Mega Evolve. It is the Delta, born of the great disturbances in this world. By the bonds born of mankind's wish and the power of the stones, it will calm the troubles that plague the world. Why call it the Delta? Because it is simply the change, the personification of it. There's no real Delta in Shinto, but it does exist within alchemy itself. And if you were to take all the concepts that we had from before, then the Delta being the catalyst, change itself, could then be Azoth. Rayquaza is Azoth, or potentially at least the fire to Azoth. Rayquaza is the fire to what Kyogre and Groudon created when they clashed. Rayquaza is effectively that which created life and would continue to protect it in its own way. Though, what would happen if someone were to intentionally take all this information and have the means to truly attempt to become a kami for nefarious reasons? Well, this is how we get the story of Ghetsis within Pokemon Black and White. Before we can speak on Ghetsis, we have to first speak on the original dragon of Unova and the Divine Truth, all that Ghetsis aimed to rule over in secret. The original dragon was composed of Reshiram, Zekrom, and Kyurem, the trio that has been given the title of the Tau Trio. This is from the Tau symbol, that which you might have called the Yin-Yang symbol. It is balance, harmony, and the interconnectedness of all things, with the white side representing masculinity and the black side representing femininity, amongst many other qualities to each side. But it is through the symbol that we see a little bit of light in the dark and a little bit of the dark in the light, showing one cannot truly exist without the other. The difference between the Tau ideal of masculine and feminine is that Reshiram is visually more feminine, while Zekrom is more traditionally masculine. More importantly, outside of Tau is Wuji. In Chinese philosophy, Wuji, which is known as without roof or ridgepole, meaning without limit, originally referred to infinity. In Neo-Confucian cosmology, it came to mean the primordial universe prior to the supreme ultimate state of being. So not only does this relate to the primordial world, the beginning of everything, but it also serves as a part of Chinese philosophy. It is this philosophy that helped spawn Shinto practice into existence. It is the inspiration for Shinto, more specifically Confucianism and Taoism, as we are talking about here with the dragons spawned it. The final piece to this, tying into not only infinity to have a loose tie to infinity energy, but also that our third of this trio represents Wuji, and that would be Kyurem, a Pokemon of infinite cold of absolute zero. When the original dragon split, Reshiram, Zekrom, and Kyurem split from it, truth, ideals, and infinity, the primordial being from which everything spawned. This would then explain why Calyrex can absorb Reshiram and Zekrom, because they spawned from Calyrex, or rather whatever Calyrex once was, which is the original dragon, with infinite amounts of energy, something that was beyond the mortal realm. To add to this, Reshiram and Zekrom serve as an ever-infinite source of energy, their signature moves being Fusion Flare and Fusion Bolt, and when one is used after the other, it only makes the move stronger and stronger by its lore, meaning that they can, theoretically, infinitely charge their powers to greater and greater destructive heights. More importantly, the two of them serve as infinite amounts of heat and energy, something that can melt away the ice that constantly grows from Calyrex. To add to this, Bulbapedia's provided information states it best, as this all relates back to alchemy. The two contraries are a pair of dragons in alchemy, named Sulfic Mercury and Sulfic Sulfur. They are commonly depicted as a white fluffy dragon with 2 wings and a black scaly dragon with 4 limbs. These depictions heavily informed the body designs of Reshiram and Zekrom. Sulfic Mercury is described as active and Sulfic Sulfur as passive, which could be a loose inspiration for the truth and ideals that Reshiram and Zekrom represent. The two contraries fight because they are opposites, yet they complete each other, similarly to the concept of yin and yang. This would also explain their battling through the heroes of Unova and their children. The two contraries are also what allowed free will and awareness to exist, reflected in Pokemon by the choice between truth and ideals. Sulfic Sulfur's name and corresponding elements could be an inspiration for Reshiram being a fire type. In addition, the 3 essentials, Mercury, Sulfur, and Salt, the elements needed to create a Philosopher's Stone, are considered the quote-unquote child of the two contraries of the two dragons. When the essentials and contraries are merged, they become a 3-headed dragon. This could be the basis for the original dragon, which split into Reshiram, Zekrom, and Calyrex long ago. The process of fusing requires the presence of Sulfic Salt to freeze the two contraries together and ground them. This could be the inspiration for Calyrex being Ice type, though this process is completed through the Splicer, which we really have very little information on. Not even the Pokemon manga tells us where its origins belie. Nevertheless, were these 3 Pokemon combined again, then the original dragon would form. But what would this actually mean? Would there be a Pokemon comparable to Arceus? Would it exist on a higher level than Arceus? Could it be stopped? And the answer to this is actually fairly irrelevant in the grand scheme of things, because once again, Kami are natural spirits. They embody concepts of reality as a collective pantheon, though you might be able to consider that the original dragon would represent the divine truth, which would then allow you to understand, perceive, or even directly lead you to the original one, and overthrow it. This is because truth and ideals, as stated, essentially make reality. This is why Reshiram and Zekrom spend so much time in the dream world, a world all Pokemon go to when they sleep, and humans have found a way to access through technology. This then leads into the idea that dreams influence reality, and then reality influences dreams, being cyclical in nature. So if you control the dragons, you can then control truth, ideals, dreams, and reality. Though there is one last part which I believe connects us to the divine truth portion of this. Truth and ideals are one and the same, though we often find ourselves chasing one or the other. This is the case with both Bianca and Charon. But when N addresses us as the player, we are told that Ghetsis sees that we are a balance of both truth and ideals, which as N states is apparently a good thing. Not only does this tie back into yin and yang coexisting with one another, within one another even, but also plays into the idea that of course, truth, ideals, Reshiram, and Zekrom were all the same thing at one point. Not only this, but what would you call the combination of both truth and ideals? You could simply call it reality, but I also see it as it combines to form the singular truth, the singular divine truth. This is because an ideal is nothing but a strong belief held by oneself, something that is your own personal truth. And if the truth of the matter is the ideal situation, then you have not only two truths, but two ideals. And this argument can be very cyclical in nature, and you can make a bunch of different points to it. The end result is that no matter what, we have the singular divine truth, the answer to all existence, with our understanding that the original one is the only one with full control or at least understanding of it. But to get there, you must gain power over a god, something that Ghetsis not only believed he could do, but something he saw himself as, very similarly to Volo. In this instance, I use the word god rather than kami, and while the idea is that Ghetsis was on the path to becoming a kami, it would be far more of a Western idea, especially since we're in Unova, which is New York within America. It would make sense that he would want to become a full god in the Western sense. He wanted to rule over everything, which becomes more apparent when we see him as part of Team Rainbow Rocket, and he claims that clearly him being in another dimension is a sign that he is destined to rule over all of existence. Ghetsis is very much like Volo in his own created destiny, though the difference between the two simply lies within their personalities. Whereas Volo treated his Pokemon and people with reverence and respect, as evident by the type of Pokemon we would see on his team, the most significant being Lucario and Togekiss, we do not find the same love and care for Pokemon within Ghetsis. His most significant Pokemon is simply Hydreigon, a Pokemon that is the epitome of hate and pain. One that has been treated by society for decades, if not centuries, as a dangerous creature. In its Dex entries, it implies that if a Hydreigon were treated kindly, it would not be as much of a terror as it is made to seem by rumor, by the older generations. Meanwhile, with Ghetsis, he continues to turn Hydreigon into a terror through abuse. This is not me flowering up my language, this is simply the truth. Ghetsis does not care about other Pokemon, and the fact that his Hydreigon has a max power move Frustration is one of the greatest signs of this. For clarification, Frustration is a move that is more powerful the less a Pokemon likes you. Effectively, Frustration would be the perfect Shadow Pokemon move if we think about it. When we step further away from this, Ghetsis absolutely sees himself as more than just Kami, but the master of all things. He manipulates the masses into believing that he wants to free Pokemon from their prisons. He keeps his true intentions hidden from everyone except his most inner circle, the Shadow Triad and the rest of the 7 Sages. In addition, even his music has the same drum and rhythm as Arceus' theme, all while interestingly enough having this symbol of Alpha on his hidden eye when we look at his concept art. The Alpha is a symbol, the beginning of everything, a symbol of dominion over all. But Ghetsis would try and fail over and over again to become a kami, to become a singular god. Through Pokemon evolutions, we get a better and more comprehensive view of the Pokemon games as they stay incredibly loyal to the games as a source material in comparison to what different stories we get within the mainstream anime, which mostly ends up being supplementary. Ghetsis here states that he could not become the hero of Unova, but instead he scouts out the child of the forest, N, who can be molded to become that hero. Someone who can speak with Pokemon, live amongst them, and is living actually in harmony with them as the original one intended. Ghetsis takes N in, and unlike his adopted sisters, would continue to be molded by Ghetsis to pursue whatever truth and ideals that Ghetsis believed in. N's sisters would try to protect him, but it was ultimately N who would eventually start seeing cracks in himself and Ghetsis. And in one version we find in the main anime that N is rejected by one of the dragons, even attacked by the flames of Reshiram, while Ghetsis screams out in anger, questioning why they are not worthy. In the games, N would eventually grow, and even though he still acts under Ghetsis until his defeat, N struggles to push away the tendrils of pain and abuse that cloud and cover his mind. It is no easy feat to go against your abuser, and even when you do, then you begin to question everything you do, everything that you are, and if it was better under said abuser's command, and of course, it isn't. But then this would explain N's turn, how after our battle he leaves. He becomes a different person separated from his abuser, while Ghetsis continues to plan against everyone, continue being this narcissist. He continues to twist and manipulate, continues to abuse as he aims to reach his own selfish goals. Ghetsis goes as far as crucifying people within the manga, and with all these actions, with all of these horrible deeds, Ghetsis is effectively a Lucifer. And this sounds like a joke, but think of it this way. Someone who speaks of the word of God but serves to twist and manipulate the public into his own vision. Someone that taints the good word and leads people down a path of sin that will ultimately unravel the world and destroy it. This is quite literally what Ghetsis does, as he claims he wants to free all Pokemon, that we should be all equal, and they shouldn't be contained within Pokeballs, all while he intends to recapture all Pokemon for himself, recreate the original dragon, and rule over existence itself with a kami under his complete control. And in his path, he would drag N, Team Plasma, and any other common person who would believe his vocalized intentions were for the betterment of all without realizing the actions that he would then take. And in fact, my friend Biggins was the one to help me with this realization, as originally I was ready to claim Ghetsis as the Antichrist. But it is far more befitting that N is the Antichrist that broke away from the role that was forced upon him. What's interesting is that N was raised up to be the figurehead, the ones that brings the public together, someone, as my other friend, Muse Artworld states, is with a soul, unlike Ghetsis, and would lead the 7 sages, which oddly reflects the same number as the 7 seals of the apocalypse. And to make matters worse, at least within Pokemon Evolutions, that same mini-series that effectively just animates the direct plot of the games, Ghetsis states that once N serves his purpose, then he will effectively kill N and take the throne for himself. Editing acrylic here again, a slight correction, he actually doesn't directly state it, it's more implied than anything. He does want to freeze N to death when N returns to fight him in the sequel, and shown through The King Returns, episode 15 of Generations. But when we look at the games, Ghetsis' team has a hard counter through moves and Pokemon to the entirety of N's team, showing that he was ready to betray N at any given point in time. Much like how the Antichrist will be sacrificed and left out for 3 days before rising and commanding a singular world government, something that Ghetsis plans for. Minus, N coming back to life, but then we get the whole episode called The King Returns. So once again, we have a very interesting parallel to Christ here. Though at the end of it all, despite trying to make himself in the image of the Kami in his own way, despite all of his plans, Ghetsis still fell at the end and crumbled, for he was never meant to attain the role of the Kami. Though in the speaking of all our apocalypse scenarios, it would be wrong of me not to talk about the religious significance of Galar. This story ties back into what Moon Channel talked about in that video I recommend from them, or at least it does so in the modern day events of Galar, while the original Darkest Day may have a bit of a different story in its symbolism. The Darkest Day is just that, a day on which the skies were blotted out with the power of not Eternatus, but its full-powered form that is Eternamax, a creature that resembles not only a giant hand, but when we look closer, we see faces on the fingers, each finger now serving as a head, as we now begin to understand the coiled serpent that is before us. There are some interpretations that within the Book of Revelation that there will be a 7-headed beast at the end times, but once again we have to step away from this interpretation of Eternamax's inspirations and instead talk about the 5-headed dragon that once terrorized Japan, Gozoryu, the legend of Enoshima. In legend, the prehistoric village of Kishigoe was plagued for 1,000 years by Gozoryu. The lands were racked by violent storms, earthquakes, and the sky itself was even blotted out by the turmoil. Though eventually a heavenly maiden, the goddess Benzaiten, would come down to earth and help Gozoryu turn a new leaf, all through the dragon's instant mad love that it had for her. It would then serve to protect the lands with great devotion, something that we can find a reflection of in Eternatus' turn from terror into a protector under the care of a trainer or even under Champion Leon. Gozoryu would eventually lay down to rest many years after it served alongside Benzaiten to protect the lands together, and its body was so massive that it stretched to an entirely different complex. In addition, it is claimed that the roots of the Enoshima Shrine goes back to 552 and was of great importance to the Hojo clan. And it is through the worship at this shrine that the first regent of the Kamakura shogunate would be visited by a mysterious woman who is thought to be Benzaiten, and this same mysterious woman would grant the 3 scales that would eventually become the Hojo clan symbol. This symbol is then the same exact one that we find upon the orbs around Calyrex's neck, and it is through the Hojo clan that Japanese Buddhism was heavily influenced, primarily through acts of Zen Buddhism, meaning that by symbolism, through design especially, Calyrex and Eternatus are tied much closer together than one might expect, and that Calyrex may just be the Buddha. Strangely, we can continue to tie these connections together as they can both Dynamax in a special way, with Calyrex turning blue while Eternatus simply becomes Eternamax. Then to follow with Calyrex, it directly states that it gains great power from worship, that people cared for it when they found it injured, though after many years and after people stopped worshipping Calyrex, its abilities also disappeared. This then means that it could not perform miracles anymore. It could not create fertile lands with one hand and cause blooms and fruits to flourish with the other anymore, and that it needed to be restored to its full power. More importantly and interestingly, when we look back at what we've already stated, Calyrex being a kami makes even more sense when we take into account that horses were the chosen mounts of the kami, thus giving us Glastrier and Spectrier. But what we get at the beginning of the story is that this fairy king stood alongside the fighting master Urshifu, Zacian, and Zamazenta, their Pokédex entries and information being the only clues towards this history, with Zacian, the older sister, standing as the sword of the fairy king, while Zamazenta was the fighting master's shield. And as if the ties weren't strong enough, both G-Max Urshifu forms are individuals that destroy evil within the hearts of their foes, whether it be through their sight, a singular punch, or a flurry of fists. These two are symbols of purity that are deeply tied to religion as well. In fact, they are very inspired by fierce deities, transformed Buddhas with terrifying appearances yet noble hearts, that judge and punish the spirits of the dead and additionally quell evil. These fierce deities aren't always considered good nor evil. They are said to simply appear in order to destroy obstacles of the path to enlightenment. They may take on terrifying forms of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, acting as guardians against demons, and will gather sentient beings to listen to the teachings of the Buddhas. Alternatively, they are also inspired by the strong Neo, Agyo, and Ungyo, a pair of viciously powerful Buddhist deities that ward off evil spirits and protect good spirits, as Urshifu is also capable of doing both. Typically, statues depicting Agyo will have its mouth open as a sign of violent aggression, while Ungyo will have its mouth closed to represent latent strength. Gigantamax Urshifu's forms seem to reverse this, as Rapid Strike Style's mouth is closed and it attacks its foes relentlessly, while Single Strike Style's mouth is open and it confidently delivers a single punch to a weak point. Additionally, the statues are often colored red and blue, though the color is not a prominent trait of either, as they can each be red or blue, and sometimes both. And in terms of real-life statues, I read from Taodon University archives. Although they appear ferocious, they are actually benevolent protectors. Placed at the entrances to many Buddhist temples in Japan, these guards are emanations of the Mahayana Buddhist Bodhisattva Vajrapani. Agyo's open mouth pronounces the Sanskrit vowel sound A, representing the beginning of life, inviting good to enter. Ungyo's closed mouth pronounces representing the end of death, shuts out evil. Agyo is commonly placed to the right and Ungyo to the left of the temple to protect the space with the sacred syllables Aum, chanted during meditation as early as the 5th through 2nd centuries BCE. But what of our two dogs then? With all this connections, all these ties to banishing the spirit, to culminating the Buddhist religion and spirit, what are the dog's kami influences, or rather are wolves, I should say? Well, this would likely simply be the Inugami, the dog god or dog spirit, and with help from yokai.com, I'm able to bring you the following information. Inugami have much in common with their other familiars, such as Shikigami and Kitsunesuki. Inugami are more commonly used in areas where foxes are not found, such as major population centers. There is even evidence of an ancient tradition of Inugami worship stretching from western Japan down to Okinawa. Powerful sorcerers were said to be able to create these spirits through monstrous ceremonies and use them to all sorts of nefarious deeds. Inugami serve their masters loyally, performing tasks just like a faithful dog. They are loyal to one person or one family only, and unless seriously mistreated, they remain loyal forever. These spirits can be passed down from generation to generation like an heirloom. This could then be connected to the literal sword and shield that are used on our two Pokemon. In addition, when we speak of this heirloom, the royal family should be the first that are brought to mind, the royal family of Galar. Individuals that, at least in the modern day, desire to take these heirlooms back and be the heroes of the modern day when Eternamax rises. They intend to take this religious symbol, defile it, and see that the public sees them as the rulers, as the heroes, as the kami in their own right, very similarly to how the government in the past, within that Edo period, as we had talked about, had wanted to make it so that way the religions served under the singular government and its religion. This is something also explored better within the manga, as Chairman Rose even orchestrates events so that way the royal brothers had the opportunity to become the heroes. though they of course fail in this pursuit, giving us a strong tie to how these Inugami can also cause ruin to those that mistreat them and how this affects future generations. But let's continue with what yokai.com states so we can draw more comparisons. The technique for creating these fetishes, the items that would summon these kami, was passed down along bloodlines, and such families are known as Inugami Mochi. These families would keep their Inugami hidden in the back rooms of their houses, under their beds, in dressers, or hidden among water jars. It is said that a family owned as many Inugami as there were members of the household, and when a new person joined the family, they too received their own familiar. Inugami were treated like family members by Inugami Mochi families, and most of the time would quickly run out to do their master's bidding, anytime their master wanted anything. However, like living dogs, occasionally a resentful Inugami might betray a master that grew too abusive or domineering, savagely biting their master to death. And while Inugami, like other familiar spirits, were created to bring wealth and prosperity to their families, a royal family for example, they occasionally might also cause a family to fall into ruin. The origin of this may tie all the way back to eras in which we can't be sure whether or not they were true in their origin point. But by the Heian period, roughly 1,000 years ago, the horrifying practice of creating one of these Inugami was outlawed. And so, long story short, it would involve chaining and beheading of the poor animal, their grave trampled on over years as their burial is unmarked, left without respect, and would then result in the more horrifying side of this creature. And what do we see with Zacian and Zamazenta in their non-crowned forms? Chains and scars. Though unlike the Inugami, they are given reverence, a proper grave, and are passed down as a part of the legend, at least the Inugami that don't have the horrifying creation to them. They are Inugami of Galar itself, loyal and pure versions that will protect the region for as long as a human can bear their sword and shield. To lead us back then to the story of Galar, we find this group standing up against Eternamax, defeating it, and it is put to slumber until the modern day when we have Chairman Rose revive it through pumping it full of Galar particles that are released into the lands of Galar, thus creating a modern day Darkest Day. Now, Chairman Rose has a lot of confusion going on. He's, though, a bit delusional, ultimately. And there is one thing that is very directly stated within the manga that would have helped the lore of the games feel better overall. And that is, no matter how you run the calculations, that in 1,000 years, all of Galar would effectively cease to exist. The energy crisis he speaks of would happen far sooner. It's estimated that 20 to 30 years from now, Galarian society will collapse. And a few hundred years further, humans and Pokemon will be destroyed. The destruction of Galar wouldn't start in 1,000 years, it would already be over. In Rose's plan to prevent this in the games, he sees himself as the hero, his own song containing Latin chanting that effectively says Rose will be the savior, which is very interesting to see that we have Latin once more here when we look at this collection of kamis and a world-ending 5-headed dragon. Though instead of being saved by Calyrex, who serves as a visual representation of purity through being the white hair, we instead have humanity pairing alongside Zacian and Zamazenta, our Inugami serving alongside humanity that treated it well and summoned it to save the day. And you might even be able to make the assumption that the heroes of Galar were never people, but rather Calyrex and Urshifu, who stand like humanoids in their own right. And considering we already know the history of Galar was hidden, it would be of no surprise to see if there was more hiding away such as this. As a small side theory, I do wonder if Urshifu in its Gmax form truly is able to banish evil spirits, and potentially through Calyrex's own power and Urshifu, it was able to separate its Dynamax ability from Eternamax, giving another possible explanation as to why Calyrex has a blue outline rather than the typical red outline we see on everyone else. It would tie rather well with the red and blue forms of Gmax Urshifu that we also do get to see. So what is the solution to the biblical apocalypse? It's the same as it has always been. It's the same as we have always seen. It is humanity and Pokemon standing together. People and Pokemon from across walks of life uniting as one through positive bonds forged through genuine connections. The original one has already decreed that when in need, Pokemon should burst forth from the grass to meet us. It is then our responsibility to take their hand in our own and march forth against the troubles of the world together. To be the change, much like the Delta Pokemon that is Rayquaza. Much like the real world, when we stand alone, there is only so much that is possible. But when people from across cultures and different backgrounds speak with one each other, people with different beliefs, whether it be religious, non-religious, culture, or otherwise, when we learn and understand each other and work towards a greater future, then that bright future can truly be achieved as evil is banished from around us every single time it tries to rise up and hurt us. This concludes our story for today. I really wanted to take this at a different angle since I was heavily inspired by Moon Channel's video. In fact, I would love to lean more into these video essays, bring more intensive and research analysis where I can feel a little bit more serious or get more serious with it that I feel like I was missing for a very long time. This is arguably one of my favorite videos, and I'm happy that this is one of the last videos for this year. Something that I feel that I could make and enrich listeners such as you far more than what I originally set my scope as with just environmental education through Pokemon. And who knows, maybe a second non-Pokemon channel will allow me to widen that scope even further, but that is neither here nor there currently. Instead, I want to thank you for watching. What are your thoughts? What's your favorite Pokemon Apocalypse or even villain that we've talked about? Was there anything that I missed? Any counterpoints to it all? Comments, watch time, and sharing the channel help the channel immensely. And if you'd like to go the extra mile, become a member of the channel for as little as $3 a month to assist my channel as I continue to bring free content to everyone while also getting perks for yourself, such as early access to videos and your name shouted out in the credits of every single video, which we're going to go do right now. Thank you to all of our members of the channel, starting with the Gods of Hope, Krill, Final Fantasy 14, Heals for Life, Biggins, and Vatty, Nit, Buzz, and Summer, then the champions, Nias, Costa, and Joshua Biggins Wilson, Crumbo as the Knight of the Court, alongside the rest of them, Nature 9000, Vatty Lemon, Jalandine, Zoomster, Kelsey, who recovers, Vio, Shiny Gems, Fix My Nurture, Krill, Final Fantasy 14, Plow, Heals for Life, and Blue Dalek as all of the Knights of the Court. I don't know why I said it so weird earlier. Then all the Wanderers of the channel, Abdallah Alani, Dark Galaxy, Star, oh gosh, I lost my place. What just happened? Everything just exploded. Dark Galaxy, Sarah B, Star as Adrian Lopez, Nail in the Fashion, Habit, Y, Bunny Richardson, WTF DC LXVI, Frank Dog, Lady Lux 7X, Mark Rivera, Shoot Pass Letter, Michael Payment, Cole, Mr. Dragon by Diagonal Yips, Doma Arigato, Lizard, Lydia Marie, E. Rick Rips, Zane Edom, Beware, Hi-Fi, Flexington, Space Lousy, Reese Maru, She, Alan Aguilar, Can 1, Zach Lane, Pokemon, Fairy Fantasia, Solus Swallows, Lotus Marie, Chase Faster, The Lunic Darkrai Dive, Minecraft, Pipioli Tama, Jeremy Ruiz, Ezra, Apollo, Jers, Izzy, Jerry Rivera, Lucky Charms, Brock Baker, SD, Mira, Marcus Hall, Anonymous, Josh Stapler, Mr. Raven, Ravi Ramsey, Zach Hempson, Nick, Zippin Pigeon 80, Mads, Kaguya Tsuki, Serdi, Octavio, False Error Code, Sun, Moon Carby, Zek62, T-Baggins, Phasing, Guya, Harrison James, Jolteon, Lyset, Camus Talk 123, Edward Foxels, Brock Schaefer, Agro Blaze, Pie King 221, Wesley Guerrero, I Wish I Was Drunk, J Swan, FUT, Hooping, Hoopa, Max Supreme, Miss Zora, J Gill, Ronji, Awitobe, Outspick, Joey L. Schmidt, Chief Snoop, Soul, Anime and Vibes, Whacker, Night Owl 707, Tarzan 2319, Sporting Amper, Hag, Travis Lamb, Lumina, Evan, Beelzebub, Michael Stein, Jacob Square, SS Zonku. I read it. I saw your comment right before this. I don't remember it. I remember Sonic being a part of that. Lost Wisteria, Zaka, Gaming News, Evil Chan, Micah, 626, Amy, Nicole Manassian, Sandwich Boss, Emmy, whatever this is, Alone Family, Medical, TH73, Sandy House, Dakota Cow, Drixel, Carl Jean, Hunter, Alice, San Kazam, Rebecca, Connor, Hugh, Jabby W, Memento, Mona, Marshy, Edward Kosowski, Mephatica Fox, Addy Cadabra, King Pie, Jack the Frost, Rice, Snivy, Addy C, DJ Monk 23, Squidwater, Rice with Just J, Just J, MD, Horse on a Cocktail, Muse, R. Will, Tolumiel, Is Scanner, 072, Andrew Frost, Big Anonymous, Summon, Sloth, Ian Ray, Big and Scene Night, Corner of the Cobb, Sleepy Bear, Jericho. I didn't miss anybody today. I didn't. Unsealy King, 40 guys, Garrett Hoffman, Dylan Peters, Malachi Burkhardt, and Heather Weiss. I thank you all for being oh my goodness, I'm falling apart. Thank you all for being members of the channel. It's greatly appreciated. We have one more video left for this year. I have an idea. We're gonna see how well it does. I'm excited, but then again, I'm often excited for whatever videos that I can make, especially when you guys do enjoy it and there's some great comments. But with that, as always, thank you so much for being here. Don't you think I wouldn't do? Don't think I would do. Please be nice to each other. I love you, and I'll see you next time.